Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. Clean Energy for America, bringing together a tremendous group of veterans and national security leaders here to talk about clean energy and our clean energy future. What a critical time to bring this conversation together with actions, continuing to evolve in Russia and Ukraine, with the Russians decreasing the gas supply there, as well as other issues here domestically. So very excited to be joined here by friends and colleagues and veterans and leaders in the industry. John Monken will be our moderator for today. So I'll hand over to John and look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Kevin, thanks so much for the kind introduction and most importantly for convening such an important discussion. So I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to make it exactly that. I think everybody will take pleasure in the fact that this is not about, going through slides and death by PowerPoint or anything like that. What we've got is people that have real world practical experience on a very timely and important topic. So I'd like to just do a quick introduction of each of the panelists, if they can go ahead and wave at us as we go through it. So we'll feel like we're in the same space, which is always an important part of it. I'll start with myself. As I mentioned, Jonathon Monken, I'm a principal at Converge Strategies, a consulting company that focuses on clean energy, energy resilience, and national security. And I am a 20-year Army veteran, and this is certainly a personal and professional issue that I really like talking a lot about. So we, as I mentioned, have some terrific panelists with great experience that I'm excited to introduce to you. First is Andrea Marr. So she's a Navy veteran. She's currently the vice president of Wilton Industrial and is the mayor pro tem of Costa, Mesa, California. So if you're looking for a sunny location to go and visit and talk to her in more detail, feel free to do that. Next is Elizabeth Perez, who is also a Navy veteran. She's the president and founder of GCG. It's a general contracting and consulting firm specializing in clean energy and water conservation projects. She's also done some terrific work working specifically with the California Department of Veterans Affairs, functioning as the deputy secretary as a tribal liaison and state disabled veteran business enterprise advocate. So a lot of great work, a lot of great knowledge of a lot of communities that we really want to engage in this process. And then Aram is the last person I want to introduce, and he's the Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships at ESS. So their mission is accelerating global decarbonization by providing safe, sustainable, long-duration energy storage that powers people, communities, and businesses with clean, renewable energy anytime and anywhere it's needed. And by that description alone, I think highlights a really, really important topic that we'll talk about today. So with that in mind, let's just tee things up here, giving you a sense of, hopefully you know why you're here. So this is the opportunity that when you get on the plane, they say, if you're not flying to Cleveland, this is your last chance to get off. What we hope is that everybody's coming with us on this journey because we're really at an interesting time from a climate standpoint and from a national security standpoint. And that's really at the heart of the discussion here today. So as Kevin alluded to, the ongoing war in Ukraine has really reminded us about our country's continued reliance on fossil fuels, meaning that it has broad-reaching economic implications, community implications, and the types of things that we really want to try and tackle, recognizing that we will continue to remain at the mercy of this market volatility and a globally priced commodity until we're able to effectively transition into homegrown renewable energy resources. So essentially what we're going to talk about today is just looking at the potential for short-term, mid-term, and long-term solutions to really help us achieve true energy independence, lower costs for consumers, and really just trying to access an area of expertise and life experiences that are so relevant here, recognizing the fact that there are few more so than veterans who really recognize the sense of urgency that's associated with it, the interconnected nature of these types of issues, and really why we want to talk about it here today. So we're going to focus on a few things. We're going to talk about these national security implications of this overall reliance on fossil fuels and the potential for solutions. Also looking at local economic impacts that clean energy investments can and will continue to have, and how businesses who are ready to step up and help with the clean energy transition can find a lot of opportunities. Certainly we'll talk about building the domestic clean energy supply chain, recognizing that the globalization of supply chain has created certainly some short-term economic benefits and cost savings, but has also really increased some of the volatility of the issues that we're talking about, and really takes a lot of the risk chain and passes it throughout the entirety of that globalized supply chain, adding additional challenges to this effort that's really underway. And the last one is just trying to talk about how we train and engage underrepresented communities as part of this workforce, recognizing this is a huge topic of interest there, And we want to make sure that there's an equity component to how we're addressing these issues going forward. So no shortage of things to talk about. I think we really have a nice tight agenda here. And I really want to kick it off with an opportunity to just dive into some questions and really just hear everybody's thoughts. There will be opportunities for the audience to ask questions. You certainly have that chat feature in the Q&A that's directly accessible to you. And then I'll continue to just manage the flow of the conversation here and the questions as we go back and forth between panels. Okay, panels, are you ready? Thumbs up. All right, fantastic. So Andrea and Liz, I want to start with you ladies first. So just recognizing, as I teed up before, as a military veteran, what really motivated you to join the clean energy workforce, and what keeps you engaged? I mean, there's a lot of up and downs in this whole process. So what keeps you showing up every day, and what can you share with us?
Thanks, John, and thanks for that introduction. So I'm a little bit biased. I was a nuclear engineer in the Navy, so I was already somewhat predisposed to look at jobs in energy when I first got out of the Navy. And I sort of thought about, solar and wind, battery storage wasn't really a thing back then. But trying to find where my place was in this energy landscape as I was getting out. And what I liked the most, and the job that I still do 10 years later, really, is working with individual customers, clients, whether they be, hospital buildings or military bases, and trying to figure out really from the bottom up how you can make those facilities more resilient, less reliant on fossil fuels, and also healthier overall, and better places to work and live. And so, that took me into energy efficiency and being a consulting engineer, and really having the opportunity to travel the country, consulting with different end users on their energy usage. So that, that's kind of like the personal transition into clean energy. I think what motivated me and kept me going, the reason I joined the military in the first place, was this idea of serving something greater than myself, and getting out of bed every day knowing that I was doing something that was important for the country. And I feel the exact same way about climate change. I think that climate change is both a national security threat, but then also just an existential crisis for our entire world. And so, what motivates me every day to get out of bed and know that I'm trying to do something about that. So, very, very similar motivations really at the end of the day for both of the jobs that I've had in my career.
That's fantastic. I love that parallel of kind of the service-oriented and impact-oriented approach to it. So thanks so much for sharing. Liz, what are your thoughts?
I'll start with just kind of a little backwards here, not backwards, but I'll start with what motivates me every day. What motivates me every day is a lot similar to Andrea's response, and that's getting up every day. And the same reason why I put my uniform on every day when I served my 8 years is having that greater sense of community, making a positive impact for our country, for us globally. And a lot of where I come from on my personal perspective, why I'm here, is I trace a lot of it to my upbringing. And I'm registered through Norfolk Rancheria, I'm Mono Indian. And a lot of it is, a lot of us served in the military and in higher numbers per capita. And also protecting Mother Earth is our religion. It really is. We grow up respecting Mother Earth, protecting Mother Earth. And because of generations serving in the military growing up, I would say the reason why I felt I wanted to make a change once I transitioned from the military was a lot of the deployments I had seen, and just really taking a reflection of other generations before me that had served, and just our dependency on resources, to be quite frank, and lives that are lost over resources. So what can we do here at home? What can we do here now in this moment to create change? And that's why I'm here.
Well, that's fantastic. And I like, talking about the generational shift. I think right now what we have is a generation that was born into the climate challenges that we have right now, and recognize that it's the preeminent issue of their generation, of their time, and certainly serves as a call to action for a lot of us that are really trying to do what we can to try and address this and set future generations up for success. We also recognize that while generations occur on a timeline of decades, administrations and policy challenges pop up seemingly now on a day-to-day basis, right? There are many changes that impact what we do. And ladies, if you can both address as kind of a follow-up to that first question about what gets you going each day and what keeps you engaged, how do you handle those kind of ups and downs of saying, well, certain things are prioritized at certain times, but then those can change very quickly? What's the common thread or the common purpose that helps you kind of ride through those ups and downs?
I'll go first on that. What I saw, for me, this is kind of deja vu in some way. And Andrea, I don't know if you feel this way because you were part of that same, as we transitioned but for myself, 2006, and we're a part of that President Obama's term when everything was, a lot of his Obama's initiatives were going out and really rolling out that I would say green carpet of change. And so that was the beginning. People are like, what is this green thing that everybody's talking about? So there wasn't really anything written, but now there is. Years later, we were a part of establishing that, even putting out workforce development plans and policy. For myself, I was boots on the ground and seeing there was a lot of cart before the horse. And now for me, and I say deja vu in a good way, that, okay, I've been here before. I've seen this 12 years ago, 10 years ago. This is where that didn't really go right that first time. This is how we can make a positive change now. And what I see right now is that there is policy. I'm talking from California perspective. There's a lot of policy here to, of course, become more energy efficient. A lot of backup battery storage and particularly wildfire, hard hit communities. And right now in my community, in Yosemite, where a lot of the tribes are, and just in rural communities, there's a lot of need for more energy efficiency in that area. However, disadvantaged communities may not be set up in certain ways. Not everything is square peg, round hole. And we really have to have that understanding of how we're going to make some of the communities and individuals qualify for some of the incentives to help them transition so they can protect their homes and protect their families in the future. And then also even help some of the, and Andrea, maybe you could speak to this being on city council, some of the cities and tribal communities that are don't have as many resources to apply to some of these programs and initiatives that particularly our state in California is pushing out. Possibly there's some assistance to help them become more energy efficient in some of these hard to hit populations. So that's what I see now.
Well said. Andrea, you want to pick up that ball as a policymaker yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's certainly a lot happening at the city level for kind of two reasons. So one is that for most citizens, your city council, your local representative is the first person that you're going to engage with, right? The federal government seems very, very far away, whereas you're going to the planning department to talk about building permits, right? And the second thing is that the impacts of climate change for a huge extent are happening at the city level. It's cities that are having to rebuild seawalls. My city had to open a cooling center for the first time ever last year due to the heat we were seeing and the number of people that don't have air conditioning in a coastal community. And so you've got cities that they're feeling the pinch right now, the impacts of climate change. And so really those two things kind of come together to, in my opinion, make cities more than anything the place where the most change is happening. And so, I think Aram can talk a little bit more about what's happening at the federal level, but certainly from the local perspective, the push is on right now to make as much change as possible from a local elected perspective.
Yeah, that's great. So let's do that zoom out with Aram, because I think he's got some terrific experience recognizing that while, several of us function in a military capacity, Aram was overseas working with USAID on energy policy programs in places like Pakistan. So Aram, I'd love to just hear more from you about how that informed your worldview about energy security, about national security issues, and really the ties in between.
Sure. I want to just start by thanking the veterans on the panel, John, Andrea, and Liz. Thank you all for your service and for your commitment to not only our nation's security, but also the security of our energy supply and our grid. So to answer your question, working in developing markets with fragile grids has certainly put the energy security question front and center. To put this into more real world, real time context, the invasion of Ukraine has not only exposed Europe's dependence on fossil fuels from Russia, it's also revived a longstanding debate about global energy security. So Russia, as we know, is one of the top oil and gas producers in the world. Just to bring that down a level, in 2021, the EU depended on Russia for 40% of its gas, 45% of its coal, and 25% of its oil. This over-reliance on fossil fuels has long created energy insecurity within Europe. And today we're also facing new threats: extreme weather, cyber attacks on energy infrastructure, and unstable energy supply chains. So energy security has always been a concern for domestic policymakers here at home. However, historically, it's been centered around oil. Over the past 50 years, oil price spikes have occurred because of shifts in supply and demand, regional conflicts, rapid economic growth in importing nations, recessions, and domestic problems in supplier countries. So to bring this home, for America to truly achieve energy security, we really need to create a resilient energy system that's built using flexible supply chains that do not rely upon politically unstable regions of the world. So there are two competing narratives out there. One argues that, we need to expand fossil fuel production. Some oil and gas producers have lobbied for more production, arguing that renewables alone can't solve today's problems. However, doubling down on our reliance on oil and gas would only continue to feed a dangerous cycle of energy insecurity and accelerate the climate crisis. The other argument, which I think we embrace on this panel, advocates for an acceleration of that clean energy transition that we've committed to. And by the way, it's already well underway. The market has seen to that. Many countries have already committed to carbon neutral energy systems by the mid-century. The EU has one of the world's most ambitious climate targets to cut greenhouse gas emissions across the 27 nation bloc by 55% by 2030, and to be fully climate neutral by 2050. So renewable electricity capacity is growing faster than ever throughout the world. In fact, our own International Energy Agency forecasts that by 2026, global renewable electricity capacity will rise more than 60% from 2020 levels. But for this narrative to win the debate, we really need technologies that can extend the sun throughout nighttime hours and reliably manage the inherent intermittency of other renewable generation sources like wind.
That's great. Well said. I mean, I think, when you look at the suite of challenges that are available there, it is a good segue of understanding. So, the interruptible nature of renewable energies, I think, is commonly used as a red herring of saying, well, that's why we can't do that. That's why we can't go there. That's why we have to continue this trend towards fossil. And it was the comment was just made in the Q&A, like this is about clean energy. That's what we're here to talk about today, and that's the direction we want to go. So, Aram, you obviously have good visibility into technology that's been extremely helpful in this. Looking at the trend line of battery storage, I mean, what do you see in terms of the bridge from where we are to where we want to be, to making sure that we're not just meeting clean energy targets, but we're also doing it in a way that improves domestic security, overall resilience, and supporting for communities? What are you seeing?
Sure. Well, I would have to say that moving to a grid powered by renewables requires longer duration energy storage. Since solar and wind energy are intermittent, as we all agree, we need to stabilize the grid with long duration energy storage. The Long Duration Energy Storage Council and global consultancy McKinsey estimate that the world's electricity grids will need to deploy 85 to 140 terawatt hours of long duration energy storage by 2040 for full global grid decarbonization. Our own Department of Energy is so convinced of the need for these technologies that it launched the Long Duration Storage Shot with the goal of cutting the cost of producing these batteries by 90% in 1 decade. But electricity grids with large storage components are intrinsically more resilient. More distributed resources, including renewable energy and storage, really ensures greater system resilience and reliability and guards against disruptions from the extreme weather disasters that we're experiencing, from California to Texas to the heat wave in Washington, D.C. this week. And while current lithium ion battery technology and key components such as the metal oxide cathodes that they require were invented in the United States, today, unfortunately, foreign companies dominate production and supply chains. And that leaves both the US and our allies in Europe with little production of lithium ion batteries and high dependence on imports. So let's just put that into perspective. China is the dominant supplier for multiple critical minerals and is likely to remain so. In the case of minerals it does not supply, such as cobalt, China has a near monopolistic control of refining capacity through its state-owned enterprises. So what does that mean? There are no economic security concerns with China's current domination of critical minerals. In 2010, Beijing embargoed the export of rare earth elements to Japan because the tensions in the Senkaku Islands, leading to the speculation that continued reliance on China for minerals that we need here and elsewhere could be a security vulnerability. But from our standpoint there is some good news, and this is where ESS is helping to address these challenges today. You touched a bit on our core mission to accelerate global decarbonization, but I think it's also important to point out that unlike lithium batteries, our American manufactured commercially available technology uses earth abundant iron, salt, and water to deliver environmentally safe storage capable of providing up to 12 hours of flexible energy capacity for commercial and utility scale energy storage applications.
That's terrific. Andrea, it looks like, yeah, go ahead, please.
I would like to add to that too, because I heard a lot of the supply chain issues, and as a general contractor that installs these backup battery storage, and I'll add another component to some of the backup. I want to give good news. I don't have good news yet, but part of that is a lot of these incentives here in California to install the backup battery storage in areas that are targeted for high threat of wildfires, which is most of rural California and also Indian country here in California, just in the United States in general. But speaking in terms of some of the incentive programs, these incentive programs with the utilities, there's a lot of backlog. And I think that's due to the pandemic. The backlog to also approve a lot of these. So by the time a lot of that backlog does get approved, the prices go up. You're talking a year, 2 years of it being approved. In 2 years, a lot of those batteries, a lot of them have been, increased pretty high. And right now, we're not able to, say on a couple of projects, we're not able to move forward with that. That's a problem. When we have projects, I don't know if there's any other general contractors here, but what I'm hearing from other general contractors and talking about supply chain issues, we are waiting for parts for solar to be installed on different projects. This is not just me. This is, I'm sure, statewide and nationally. A lot of these parts are on back order. And then on top of that, here in particularly with our PG&E, the SCE, and then SDG&E, the 3 big, and SoCal Gas, 4 big utilities here, there's a waiting period to have a lot of these approved and to get things up and running. So that's another issue that we have. There's a lot of bottlenecking. And again, I think it just really goes back to that workforce component. The supply chain, yes, and workforce component on within our utility departments here within our state. And I'm sure other states are feeling the same pain we are here too.
Yeah, Andrea?
I was going to say, I think that's totally right. It's not happening fast enough. But at the same time, I think we've got to look at the macro perspective, which is that solar prices are a quarter of what they were 15 years ago, right? Battery storage technology, I mentioned when I first got out, working for a battery company wasn't even an option. just because there were like 2 of them. So we've seen the rise of available technologies. We've seen, somebody asked about nuclear microgrids in the chat, but just the ability to integrate technologies overall. John and I have worked together on a couple of projects in the past, and we sort of joked that everything was a demonstration or a pilot project, trying to figure out how we could put together a microgrid that allowed facilities to be resilient in the face of blackouts. We're past the point of pilots, finally. We're actually into the phase of deploying real systems that allow resiliency for critical facilities in a way that's really exciting. So I think Liz is feeling the pinch of like what's going on sort of day to day in the market right now. And there are a ton of supply chain constraints and inflation problems overall. The big picture, I think a lot of the talking points that are not supportive of clean energy are often 15 years old, when prices were higher, when it was impossible to put together a working microgrid, when we were stuck in demonstration project land. And now the reality is, a lot of the studies I'm doing, a lot of the customers I'm interacting with, we could make a project happen if we wanted to. We could actually figure out a way to get them off fossil fuels, or to be 100% resilient, or convert from natural gas to pure electrification. Those are all things that are happening right now.
Yep, I agree. And that's the beauty of all this. And the other side of it, there's a lot of urgency. There, a lot of urgency, especially here in California. And I'm going back to that fire that's happening in Yosemite. There's a lot of that. And we're beyond, yes, the demonstration mode, the pilot mode. And it's all about, taking a look at how we can transform these communities to become resilient for our future. And a lot of what I'm looking at is taking a look at how Indian country can become more resilient to also help other communities outside of tribal communities.
I want to just round that out because I agree with everything that's been said. I'll start from, supply chain. As an American manufacturer, our supply chain and labor philosophies are pretty simple. And that's, to the extent humanly possible, buy American and hire Americans to build our batteries. In terms of the challenges that are unique to or not so unique to just California anymore, we're already becoming a part of that solution. We're working with a major utility in Southern California as part of their wildfire mitigation program to address these public safety power shutdown events by, establishing a functional microgrid that's powered by solar and our long duration batteries to ensure that a facility like a medical center, a gas station, other pieces of critical infrastructure can go on as that utility has to de-energize lines because of fire risk.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of a direct manifestation of some of these choke points, these challenges that are out there when you're looking at what has to happen given the real world impacts of these climate driven events that are exposing areas of weakness that either we didn't immediately recognize or we just didn't realize, the time imperative that was associated with getting something done right now, that we're not in a mode of waiting, and it's no longer a technical hurdle yet to be overcome by some space age technology that we're not familiar with. It's really about scaling and implementing the suite of technologies that are available right now to get us there. Andrea, it looked like you had something to add too.
I was just gonna, the wildfire public safety power shutoffs were such an interesting example where I think, especially wearing that hat of having been in the military and seeing the way in which supply chains can impact your ability to be a warfighter. I was at a conference recently talking with fire departments across the state of California about the different technologies that they're trying to implement to avoid public safety power shutoffs, to deal with firefighting in general in remote places. And I just kept thinking about, this is the same stuff we've been talking about in the context of national security. This is about how do you get resources where they need to be, when they need to be, how do you value the mission above all else, and identify the critical path, what facilities, what resources are the most critical to have when and where, and then get power to them. And so, I know some of you I know some of you personally, and we've talked a lot about having seen those examples in our previous lives, and I think we continue to see them as those national security type events happen here at home.
Yeah, there's great context and framing that comes from looking at an issue like national security or like community resilience, because it really puts a very clear face on what the driving force behind all of these decisions really are. Otherwise, you kind of get wrapped around the techno-economic component of it, or the policy piece of it, or just one aspect of what's happening right now, but recognizing that it has to be a holistic solution that gets us there. There's more than one way to be successful in this type of work. And I think certainly some of the trends that we're seeing at a national scale indicate a fundamental shift in how business is done. I know, some of the discussion that's happening in the Q&A of recognizing that something interesting has happened in the last few years that had never occurred previously, which is there are more power generation projects in the queue nationally that are non-utility projects than there are utility projects, which fundamentally changes a lot of the conversation around who's bringing solutions into the space, how it's balancing with existing, transmission and distribution systems and technology that are out there, but then also just bringing greater emphasis to the individual customer, a load-centric version of saying, what is it, to your point, Andrea, like what do people need on the ground in order to either do their part to be more resilient as individuals, to reduce their own carbon footprints, or to make contributions that at the larger scale are really going to be helpful to it. So Liz, something I wanted to build on that you said earlier was just talking about workforce. So when we talk about what you can do to engage in these types of efforts, what kind of opportunities are out there for veterans or non-veterans alike, people that are really focused on trying to help be part of the solution here and trying to engage in a meaningful way? What kind of trends are you seeing?
I wish I could promote more. I don't think we're there yet, though. I think we will get there. I know we'll get there. And that's because I've been to different conferences. Right now, there's a lot of the funding to start to develop a lot of these projects. And I know there's a big challenge right now within the Department of Transportation, and also DOE and DOL all have to kind of work together. And the reason why I know of some of what's going on is, again, because of my tribal background. With a lot of the folks there, the leaders from these departments have reached out to us saying, hey, what do we need to do? How do we deploy these EVs within rural communities throughout the US? And one of the things I suggested was something that during President Obama's term was a lot that during his term was the usage of veterans, deploying veterans. Who better to deploy projects but veterans in the middle of nowhere? And we love being out there. We really do.
Well, for the most part.
Well, it depends on exactly where you're going. But really, like who better to do the job of this, massive EV rollout across the US, honestly, but veterans. We know how to live in these different conditions. And I did talk about a deployment team. I'm giving you an idea here, just throwing out an idea. I share it openly. And I think that's something actually we did when we were, doing a lot of our solar projects from Eureka down to the border here in California. And I think the same thing can happen again with EV. There's such, it's an ambitious goal to have 100% EV on the Fed side by 2035. It's an ambitious goal here in California by 100% EV by 2035. That's only 13 years from now. And I've been all over the state and a lot of parts of the US, and we got a long way to go. And it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's where I see the job market and a lot of the training, and not just EV, but also backup battery storage for that EV. The building out solar is part of the, not your gas station, but car charger station.
Sure.
Really, for all vehicles, not just Tesla. I love Tesla, but we're trying to be diverse here. So, just really taking a look at that. And that's one I'll throw out there.
Yeah, that's great. And Aram, I wanted to ask you about, you kind of get this chicken or the egg conversation when it comes to policy. So we talked about the emergence of technology. We talked about cost reduction of renewable energy sources and supply chains, but I just wanted to get a sense from you on, the chicken or the egg of policy, specifically as it relates to battery storage, of understanding, or Are we setting ourselves up for success? Are we falling short? Is the technology really driving the policy in the other direction? I just kind of wanted to get your take on how those levers play off of one another.
Yeah, and I'll just start by saying it's been a tough past few weeks. I think we were all hopeful that the Senate reconciliation effort would have included the marginal investments in bringing some sanity to our tax code. In other words, expanding the existing clean energy investment tax credits and production tax credits to include domestically manufactured battery energy storage. As we all know, that process seems to have concluded without those provisions, and that ship has sailed. So let's talk about what the risks to that are, or the risks that presents to the industry in the near term. So China, again, has been able to basically surge ahead of us in clean energy manufacturing because their government provides significant incentives to industry. In the US, our policymakers really need to double down on incentivizing the innovation, the commercialization, and then the domestic manufacturing of the clean technologies needed to secure our energy independence. So some specific actions that our policymakers and legislators can take: amend the tax code to incentivize domestic manufacturing and procurement of clean energy technologies like the long duration batteries that we're building today. Just as an example, a standalone energy storage investment tax credit would drive an additional 22 gigawatts of domestic energy storage deployments through 2030. These are stalled projects waiting for certainty into the tax code that would be more or less shovel ready, according to the S&P.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Add on to that. I put this.
Who
in
knew
the
you
chat.
were passionate about this? So what are the
I am
odds?
so passionate. I'm about to jump
No,
in.
please.
No, really, what I didn't add in the last comment is that workforce development and the training is needed, but also what did exist then was, and during President Obama's term, was the workforce incentives for the training dollars and also the hiring dollars. Let's be very honest, on these companies, they're not always incentivized to hire, outside of their own or train outside of their own. So that also needs to be initialized to some type of, maybe it's not the similar program, but I think we don't have to reinvent everything. We can take bits and pieces of what was used and transform it in today's world. And it will take not every department working in silos. It's going to take, as I mentioned, the DOLs, the DOEs, the DOTs of the world, is we're all trying to accomplish these goals. And that will really help us out here on the ground.
Yeah, that's great. Andrea?
I'll just add from the city perspective too. I mentioned cities are really seeing the front lines of a lot of the impacts of climate change. They're also not seeing any of the dollars to go fight the impact of climate change. And so you're looking at general fund money that is paying for seawalls and general fund money that is going to cooling centers, not to mention any natural disaster emergencies, the flooding, the other things that will occur as a result of climate change. And so, one thing I've been very concerned about and hoping the federal government was able to move something forward was getting those dollars out to the front line and the cities that are having to pay for those things. And then, back to workforce, I do think that's another opportunity for that involvement at the municipal level to have an impact. Again, if you don't have to travel far. Liz is promoting, the national EV strategy, but I think very much in your own city, there is an opportunity for training and education as it relates to the deployment of clean energy.
Yeah, that's great. Very well said. Aram?
I love
Maybe
that.
that's great.
Yeah,
I think those are great ideas, but Andrea, I'm really sensitive to your point. So let's bring it back to California for a minute. Governor Newsom's budget proposed roughly $380 million to accelerate deployments for long duration energy storage. The California legislature, via a trailer bill, has basically obligated $140 million of that. That's not enough to really address the challenge that California faces. So I would encourage, friends on the panel and friends who have, zoomed in with us, who are in California, encourage the California legislature to provide Governor Newsom with the full request of $380 million for the CEC to accelerate deployments of commercially available today long duration energy storage.
And the great thing about those funds and how it was originally proposed actually was that they were going to get out into the communities, that the idea behind that money was that you would see an impact for industrial facilities, for commercial facilities, for municipal facilities. So, sometimes funding takes forever to sort of wind its way down the rabbit hole to the end user. And what Aram's talking about was really an attempt to get the dollars where they needed to be as fast as possible. And unfortunately, we're not quite there.
We're not quite there at all. And that was the 2-year held up on the backup battery storage that was initialized in 2020. And on some of my projects, I'm still on hold because of the wait. And it's not with everybody. It happens to be with a lot of Indian country, because a lot of the requirements for some of these communities to do the checks and balances don't always, just to face it, I'll be honest, in Indian country, it's different governments and different ways to try to get people approved. So that's something I would also ask too, is the CEC, CPUC. The rules were changed in the middle of, first we had everybody, a few tribes approved, and then in the middle of it, about 6 months later, it got disapproved because the rules were changed, and it created distrust. And that creates problems, especially when you're talking Indian country. So that was we just need a little bit more help. And I'm not sure how many folks are on that board that represent some of these communities I'm talking about, but that would be helpful to have them on the board so that we can prevent these problems and move a lot quicker.
Yeah, that's great. Well said. So we do have questions were popping up as we went in the Q&A. I just want to make sure we take an opportunity before we wrap up for today. A lot of good questions about nuclear energy. So certainly there were discussions around nuclear powered microgrids. There were some follow-up questions just kind of talking about what nuclear's capabilities are related to things like waste heat. So we have a Navy nuke on the panel right now. So I'd be curious to just kind of hear some of your hot takes on it. So what do you see as how it fits into this solution space?
I'm obviously incredibly biased, and I'm super supportive of nuclear everywhere, small nuclear, big nuclear. I think it is, carbon-free energy, and it's sort of a shame that we've let so many of our nuclear power plants get so old without replacements. So it's probably not super popular, but I think it should be part of the strategy moving forward. And I know there's a couple thousand Navy nukes who have my back on that one.
That's great. Well, certainly, I think, the theme is, as we talk through what this means from a national security perspective, there are national security driven solutions like you just described, right? You got a lot of Navy nukes out there that have a lot of experience and recognize the effectiveness of that generation source. And really just, I want to kind of bring it back full circle here, since we're at the tail end of it, and recognize that every one of the components that we talked about today, so whether we're talking about different generation sources or generation types, we talk about supply chains, we talk about techno-economic drivers, we talk about workforce, these all have implications in the national security lens of recognizing that it's not going to be one of the things that we talked about that really helps us kind of get on the right glide path here to try and address some of these national security issues. But it really does give us a very focused narrative with which to drive innovation in a lot of these spaces, to drive action in a lot of these spaces related to policy, related to technology, related to economics. And that's why I'm so grateful that we had this opportunity to talk about it today. So what I want to do is just give each of the three panelists a massive 30-second window of time. And then I'll flag you with my hand when your 30 seconds are up. But I want to just give you an opportunity for your parting thoughts that you want people to walk away with today. So I'm going to go right to left on my screen, and Andrea, I want you to go first.
Well, thanks, John. I really appreciate the opportunity, and it's great to chat with all of you. I think a couple of takeaways for me. Really there are thousands and thousands of veterans out there, each of whom has an experience that is similar to John, Liz, and I in seeing the criticality of getting energy where it needed to be while we were forward deployed, in recognizing that, part of any good supply chain, part of resiliency and security overall is making sure that we have the energy to support the mission. And I would just encourage all of you to speak up and help be part of this change moving forward.
That's terrific. Liz, your thoughts?
I believe that we're just, in a very critical time, as you know, and everything starts local. Just as Andrea knows, everything starts local, whether that's your city, to the county, and also tribal communities. And the other, takeaway too, I really encourage states to take a look at your tribal communities and seeing what they're doing to become more resilient. They're in the front lines. A lot of these tribes are in the front lines of everything climate and disaster. And here in California, particularly, it's wildfires. And we're always trying to look at how we can become more resilient before it was even talked about. Take a look at what funding they're doing, what projects are doing. A lot of them are taking a look already at microgrid and becoming their own utility and selling power to communities or whatever that might be. I think it's important. And also the third, and this is it, a lot of the tribal communities we have served, many of us, our families have served, and we have this broadened sense of definitely protecting our homeland. We're First Nations, of course, we want to protect our homeland, and also that great sense of duty as well.
That's terrific. Thank you, Liz. And Aram, final thoughts from you, please.
Sure. Well, first, I want to just thank my fellow panelists who are veterans again for your service to our country and service to the cause of securing our nation's grid. I'll just leave you all with a number again: 22 gigawatts. 22 gigawatts of domestic energy storage projects are stalled because of uncertainty at the federal level with the tax code. So we've got a lot of work to do together, but we're confident that with political will and focused investment, the next 5 years really have the potential to be a turning point and a catalyst for building a new and cleaner path to energy independence. But that path must be towards a pretty singular goal, which I think we all embrace, which is clean energy. And that's got to be backed by a strategic transition plan, government and industry collaboration, and smart investments in innovation. So if we can unite around that, then decarbonizing the grid not only ensures secure sources of energy, it will also address the climate crisis, which is the most formidable challenge facing our country today.
Fantastic. Well, thank you one and all for your participation and thoughts and insights here today. I certainly benefited from it, and I think we did as a group. For those questions that we didn't get to, I really appreciate you stimulating the conversation there. We tried to weave as much of that into the conversation as possible, but really your participation and engagement today is much appreciated. So Kevin, with that, I'll hand it back to you, sir.
Great. Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate listening to the conversation. I've been on this other side as a moderator and panelist, really an honor to be in a position to convene this discussion today on behalf of Clean Energy for America. And really appreciate all the wisdom and thoughts here. And it is great to know, there's so many great people in the fight here, so many great veterans and folks who are thinking about from a national security perspective. And for our folks in the audience and our vets in the audience, if you're looking for ways to get engaged, please reach out to Clean Energy for America at ceforamerica.org. Go on the site. If you're not a member, become a member. If you're a veteran or you're in clean energy, share your story on the Faces of Clean Energy tab on the Clean Energy for America website. Share your stories. Help us share what's going on in industry out there. We know we're all very passionate and we can make a big impact. Clearly, folks in the panel here today are making an impact. We want to hear your stories as well. So on behalf of Clean Energy for America and Andrew Reagan, the Executive Director, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to our panelists. John, thank you for moderating. Great to see you all today. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you all.